Hey folks, it is Monday, the March the 8th. I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you and your families are healthy and avoiding COVID or recovering from it. I know a couple people right now that are grappling with it. So anyway, I just wanted to make a short thing. Hopefully it'll be short because I got some feedback on some of the podcasts where we've talked about white supremacy and some questions about that. So I wanted to talk about kind of white supremacy today, specifically two kinds: conscious white supremacy and unconscious white supremacy. And I want to suggest to you that our mayor, a white man that's the mayor of a predominantly Black city, may be manifesting unconscious white supremacy in terms of his comments, his response to complaints about those comments, and other things that he's done. So we'll get to that in just a second, though. So hopefully this will make some sense. For the record, I didn't come up with this stuff on my own. I've had tons of folks of color in my life over the years where we research these things, talk about these things. I see these things manifest in my own life. So I'm not immune to any of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. And I hope that it makes some sense. So I've got a little slideshow that might be helpful to walk through, I thought. So when we talk about white supremacy, we're talking about the conscious and unconscious belief that people racialized as white, categorized as white, are better, superior people in comparison to all other racial and ethnic groups, and should therefore be kind of dominant or in control of society and culture. So I want to, again, elaborate or just emphasize these two different words: conscious and unconscious. So the media usually talks about conscious white supremacy. So the Klan and so forth are examples of people who are consciously white supremacist in the sense that they think and say out loud and are aware that they think that white people are better than all other peoples. Unconscious, on the other hand, it suggests that those beliefs can be there and you're not necessarily aware of it. And what I would argue, and others much smarter than me have argued, that if you're raised to be a white person in this society and you see white people in power, you see a white Jesus, you're told about all the great things white people do, you're told about how we're better than everybody else in the world, that we internalize those ideas whether we're aware of them or not. So what this means is that you can be a conservative that says, I don't believe that white people are better, but you can still act in ways that are white supremacist. You can be a liberal, right, and internalize these ideas and then manifest them in our daily life with how we move through the world. So white supremacy is this ideology that our country was built on, and it affects white people and our white socialization, but it also affects people of color. I have met people of color who altered their skin tone, for example, to make it lighter because they think lighter is more beautiful. So white supremacy as an ideology affects everybody. We internalize it in different ways. Some of us internalize it as a form of superiority. People who aren't white generally internalize it as a feeling of inferiority in comparison to white people. So conscious and unconscious white supremacy. This is a great example, and the one that comes to everybody's mind, of conscious white supremacy. So this is the Ku Klux Klan in Valdosta, Georgia in 1922. There's roughly 150 plus folks in hoods, and then we have another big group in the middle being initiated. But these are people who argued for the supremacy of white people. They said that publicly. Their organization espoused that, and their politics were driven by it. So this is kind of 19th and 20th century forms of kind of conscious white supremacy. Come into the 21st century, neo-Nazis or white nationalists are these fellows right here. This is League of the South members. This is Michael Tubbs. We interviewed him for our film on Confederate culture. These are folks that think white people are consciously superior, or they're conscious white supremacists because they believe and say some of this stuff out loud. They think white Southerners are kind of being infiltrated by immigrants and multiculturalism and so forth. But great example of 21st conscious white supremacist. When we talk about unconscious, and again, this doesn't make the media, it doesn't make the press, and it's kind of a controversial area to dive into. So I really love some feedback and some questions about this, and would love to talk with anybody that wants to talk about it. But I and others argue that if you're socialized as white, you're going to internalize that you're better than other people, whether you are aware of that or not, right? So some of the ways, again, and this can affect people of color too, but when white people, for example, think white people should be in charge, and I've met some Black folks that thought white people are supposed to be in charge too. So again, this affects us all and we can all internalize it. But when white people assume that I as a white man should be in charge because I'm just a better person, that's a great example of maybe unconscious white supremacy, especially if I don't acknowledge that I think those things. If I assume that white people know more, they're smarter, more intelligent than other non-white people. You see this a lot lately, assuming something's gone wrong or an injustice has occurred if white people aren't in charge of a situation, organization, or political office. I would argue this third one is behind a lot of these unfounded voter fraud claims that we see among a lot of folks in the GOP. Even though members of the Republican Party said there wasn't systematic voter fraud, there are a lot of people, and I would chalk this up to their feeling that white people are losing their country, right, and losing political power. So they think something wrong or an injustice has been done in the electoral system. I think another form of unconscious white supremacy that gets manifested is just assuming that white people are the norm, that we're going to measure social progress by, we're going to measure other groups by, whether those groups are here in the United States or somewhere else in the world. So we use white people as the standard to measure everybody else as if we're the apex of humanity. I think another form of unconscious white supremacy is just the fact that most white people know very little about the histories of people of color and the experiences of people of color, even though those histories and experiences are directly related to our own. And in fact, we have the privilege of not knowing African-American history or Chicano history or Native American history. We're not even curious about those histories. Like, for example, I live in the South, so African-American history in the South is directly connected to my history as a white person in the South. So I think just our numbness and lack of curiosity is a kind of a form. It's just not worth knowing any of that information as a form of kind of unconscious white supremacy. I think what I see with white conservatives locally, as well as some liberals, is assuming that you have the right to define for non-white people what racism is. So again, it's assuming that people of color aren't intelligent enough or won't give you a good definition. So they need us to define what racism is for them. It's a great example of supremacy. And last but not least, and we see this a lot these days, when white people are challenged or questioned by other non-white people, or even white people at times, about what they do, what they say, what it means to be a white person, their racial status, they often experience those questions and challenges as an attack or as reverse racism, or what you hear today is cancel culture. So I live somewhere where white men get the microphone on the radio, they say a bunch of outlandish things about Black people, about immigrants, about COVID. And if you ask them for evidence to those things, or you challenge them, or you ask them to go on the air and have a conversation about it, they will accuse you of attacking them. They'll accuse you of trying to cancel them out, etc. So those are just a few things. This list isn't exhaustive, but I thought it would be a good place to start. I bring this up because I live somewhere where our community is a predominantly Black community. So this is 2019 census data. As of 2019, it was estimated that 53% of the folks that live in Valdosta, Georgia, are African-American or Black. About 41% of our population is white. So what we've been seeing over the past 4 decades is that our cities become more and more Black and our counties become more and more white. City school systems predominantly Black, county systems predominantly white. Schools are more segregated now than they were racially than they were in the 1970s. So we have a predominantly Black city with about 41% white folks. I bring that up because I want to shift to the conversation of Scott James Matheson, the mayor of this predominantly Black town. And before I go into kind of what he's done and said, and how I think that reflects kind of unconscious white supremacy, I want to be very, very clear. I'm not saying the mayor is a racist. I don't know the mayor. He seems like a nice guy. He's probably a good husband and probably a good father. So I'm not suggesting that he's a racist guy. I don't know. In fact, when I look on his Facebook page, you'll see stuff like this. So it's clear to me that he gets along with Black folks, especially those that are politically like him, politically conservative. So here's a picture of him with Diamond and Silk, 2 ardent Trump supporters that I think have been in Valdosta kind of campaigning or whatever. So this isn't about the mayor being a racist or anything. I don't know him and know him well enough to make any determination about that. What I can talk about is what he said publicly and what's happened when he's been challenged about what he said publicly. So I just want to play for you some audio. Some of you have heard some of this before. Some of it might be new. But for example, in November of last year, he was on a podcast with a former employee of his, Chad Whittle, and he was asked the question of why he wanted to become the mayor of Valdosta. And I thought his response is really interesting. And so I just wanted to make sure you heard it.
What made you interested in running for mayor in addition to owning radio stations and hosting a morning show?
Town needed me, and I thought that for about the last 2 decades.
So let me pause it there. I've never heard a politician say a town needed him. I've never heard him say that they thought that the town needed him for 2 decades, right? I've heard politicians say, you know, I was asked to run. I was a member of the Republican Party. They thought I'd be a good candidate, but not in the sense of this, I'm needed by the town. I'm going to kind of come in the town and solve the problems that I witnessed over the course of 2 decades. So it's just interesting.
The time just wasn't right. 20 years ago, I did practice politics by accepting a post, an appointment first to the Bremerton City Council, finding out I had a knack for it, so I ran for another 4 years and did that. I did 6 total there in 2 years as mayor pro tem. Walked away from it all for about, I don't know, 17, 18 years. And then it was just time. John Gale was sitting before me being interviewed one day saying he wasn't running again. I didn't hear of anybody I had a confidence in stepping up, and it turned out there was 5 of us in that race. And now, 10 months in, I'm thrilled it was me that was sitting here during all that's been thrown at us in 2020.
Okay, so the mayor felt like he was needed. He felt that way for 2 decades. He says later in this little statement of his that it was time. He talked to the former white mayor. For the record, Valdosta's never had a black permanent mayor. They had a temporary one briefly. But he's talking to the white mayor. He's not running again. Of the 5 people that are running, 3 black, 2 white, none of those folks he thought were going to do a good job. And in the end, he says that he's thrilled that it was him given the challenges of 2020. Now, I bring this up because I've never heard another politician constantly say, because he does this on his live talk show on a regular basis, how assured he is and at peace he is with the fact that he won the election because he feels like his opponents would have done such a terrible job, particularly given the challenges of COVID. And again, I don't, there's something about that just sits very awkwardly with me. And again, I've never heard a politician congratulate themselves and pat themselves on the back as much as our current mayor does. I want to play next to you kind of what he had to say about the fact that in this last year, we've had more voter mobilization and canvassing than ever. The presidential race was hotly contested, as we all know. There was a runoff for the Senate here. And black folks and white folks, but black folks in Valdosta mobilized and worked extremely hard to get everybody to the polls. There were all kinds of voter efforts to do that. And the mayor had this to say about them.
One day, it's illegal to pay somebody to vote. But on the next day, being election day, it's legal to pay somebody to canvass. Even though they don't canvass, even though they don't go to a house, they hop on a bus, they go down, they vote, they come back, and they cash a $75 check. So the day before, it's illegal. The next day, it's completely legal, or at least enough gray area.
I think a lot of what that is they pay somebody $75 to find 5 friends to take to the poll. Hey, here's $75. I want you to go over there. And
As long as you bring 5 friends, they get a $75 check as well, Jack. You're exactly right. So gray, the that they don't even go after it to prosecute. Not this ethics guy I just talked about. I handed over the 65 $75 checks, banned out on the table, cashed at the same liquor store, deposited at the same thing. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, well, it was illegal yesterday, but today's election day, so it's called canvassing. And they can't pay. They brought 5 friends. They hopped on a bus.
It's like ballot harvesting. On the right, we say, well, that can't be fair because it's you don't know where those ballots came from. But on the left, it's like, oh, well, what's wrong with it? As long as people get the vote, we need to get these votes in. Hey, getting these votes in is important. And I'm like, no, it's not.
And if you oppose it, Jack, you suppress it.
I don't care. I am suppressing those votes because they're not. I am blatantly coming out right now saying I think we should suppress the vote. I think suppressing the vote needs to be done because a lot of people who aren't allowed to vote are voting because we're making it too easy.
Jack has long thought that you should have to test the front door,
I think voting should be hard. I don't think it should be this easy. And I don't care if you think anything negative about me because I'm an old man and I'm going to die in the near future. So it doesn't matter what you think of me.
So the mayor and his co-host producer, neither of which are political scientists, make a variety of accusations. Again, this is a white mayor of a predominantly Black city who basically says that people that were paid to canvass didn't canvass, that people were paid essentially to vote. They got their canvassing check, went to the liquor store and cashed it. They were skirting the law, and it was such a gray area that no one bothered to prosecute anybody. He then goes on to laugh as his co-host jokes about voter suppression and the need for it, as the co-host makes unsubstantiated claims about people voting that aren't supposed to be voting. And then the mayor brings up that his co-host and long-term time producer thinks that we need to have poll tests. And they kind of chuckle about this. And there's more, but let me just leave it there. So the mayor makes these comments, the mayor of a predominantly Black community in a state that has a long history of voter suppression, in a state specifically against Black voters, in a state that once used poll tests to exclude Black voters. And it makes it to the public. Then a number of requests are made to talk with him about it, and he refuses to do so. Those comments then lead 4 organizations, 3 of which are Black, one's multiracial, to basically be forced to file a complaint with the city against him. And for the record, those organizations were Concerned Clergy, which I believe has 36 different Black ministers in it, representing 3 dozen or so congregations. You have the local chapter of the NAACP, the Lowndes Valdosta Community Alliance, and the Mary Turner Project, which is a multiracial organization. So we let the mayor know that we have a problem with his statements. He's made aware by city council people who were canvassers that his unsubstantiated inflammatory claims are offensive. He's made aware by city employees that what he has said is offensive and insulting, and also troubling that he would advocate for the suppression of any vote, right? Or at least laugh as folks do this, right? So he's made aware of all of these things, and he won't talk about it. And this is kind of what happened. So we filed this complaint against him. He gets the complaint on the same day that the city council, city clerk, and city manager does, and he's silent for about a week. And then when he finally says something about it, the only thing he has to say, let me back up, in a city council meeting, Councilman Eric Howard, at the end of the meeting where council speak, he made a really eloquent comment to the mayor publicly that what the mayor had said was offensive, had offended many city employees and so forth, and that this was a teachable moment. In so many ways, Mr. Howard was giving the mayor an opportunity to apologize publicly, and the mayor did not. Instead, he adjourned the meeting, and that was that. So over the course of about 8 days, there's no apology. There's no questioning about why is everybody mad? What did I do wrong? But what we do get about 8 days later is the mayor complaining on his radio show that the local Valdosta Times isn't treating him fairly. So this is that.
All right, two subject matters I want to touch on real quick. I'll start this hour by saying I'm a little baffled. The group that filed the complaint against me didn't do it officially. They had the rule sitting in front of them. They chose to do it incorrectly. They came back and did it correctly.
So this isn't true. The mayor received our complaint the same day. We submitted it digitally. We're pretty aware that we're going to have to all go by and sign the complaint, but he's basically saying we didn't do it right. We chose not to do it right. Again, not true. And I just feel like I got to clarify that for him.
The Daily Times decided that's the top story today. The resubmission of the exact same complaint. The top story.
Did they actually mention my name wrong?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, they butchered that.
The Valdosta Daily Times gets Jack Ring's name wrong. He's upset about that. Not upset about what they said, not upset about its impact on our community, not upset on the fact that, you know, you're the mayor of a predominantly Black community, but y'all are upset about not getting press coverage or them getting your name wrong in the newspaper.
So
That's fine, I don't care.
So here's the problem I have with it. They can do whatever they choose to do. If they want to react to this thing. But I submitted the statement and the prohibitions to which the mayor cannot do. I submitted my statement and those prohibitions to him at 3:41 yesterday afternoon. I didn't get presented to with the official complaint till 2:10. I wanted to make sure I knew my timeline. I guess 3:41 is too late in the day to not make the banner headline across the top as a response. You should be ashamed, I think. You can go ahead and explain that you put the thing to bed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll believe you. But good Lord, guys. You asked me for it, I gave it to you. And you chose to not run it. I guess that's for tomorrow after they stir things again today.
So again, white mayor makes all these inflammatory claims, jokes about poll tests, is made aware by a substantial number of Black folks that all that is offensive and troubling. And what he instead responds at 8 days after receiving the complaint is basically saying that he's upset and that the Valdosta Daily Times should be ashamed that they didn't put across the front page top banner that he actually responded to the complaint. A few days later, the next thing he says is that he's being punished for simple speech. It's hard to hear in this audio, but again, no apology, no curiosity about what he might have done wrong. He's instead being punished for simple speech.
It's a tough world. You're going to get criticized at every turn for simple speech. Is with actions. I'm punished for simple speech. So what the new world, people?
So he's talking about an ethics complaint before this. He says that guy's getting punished for that ethics complaint. He's getting punished for just simple speech, not that he said anything inaccurate, unsubstantiated, inflammatory, just simple speech. And then a few days later, he starts talking about the fact that this is just a matter of opinion. This is just a difference of opinion, and that we simply just clearly don't understand that that's the case. So he feels the need to provide us with a unsolicited, free civics lesson. So let me play a little bit of that to you, or for you.
All right, listen, this will be my only brief comment. It's a civics lesson, so and I'm not going to criticize. I got plenty of built up inside me to say how it's been handled.
So it's funny that you're not going to criticize us, Mayor, but you feel the need to give us a civics lesson. Seems like criticism to me, not to be funny, but let's just say what it is.
But here comes your civics lesson. A difference of opinion is not an ethics violation. This obviously has to do with me and what's been splashed in the Daily Times. A difference of approach or opinion or how I move is not an ethics violation. Period. An ethics violation would be taking money. An ethics violation would be gaining favor for somebody to come develop here. An ethics violation is something in that nature. And I even put A through L of the actual prohibitions for somebody that sits in the seat that I sit. The actual prohibitions. Chose not to put it in there. So a smart person could read, here's what somebody's saying that is unethical, and here's what's actually.
I read the complaint, and I was reading.
Did you read the entire complaint?
I read enough of it.
Shows the
I just want to pause it for a second because Jack Ring feels the need to pipe in here, and he says, I read the ethics complaint. And the mayor says, well, did you read it all? And he goes, no. And I bring this up because I know a lot of men, white men in particular, but some men of color too, that have everything to say about something that they actually haven't done all their homework on. And I think Mr. Ring kind of demonstrates that with the need to kind of pipe in here without having actually read the complete complaint.
pull out.
I read enough of it to think about that commercial that goes, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Well, Jack, I'll give you just a normal example. Every time you rule on something, vote on something, every time the council says, 7-0, we should go in this direction, 100% of the people aren't in agreement. 75% say, way to go, that's the way we should go. 25% say you're doing it wrong and you're not thinking about us or what. So that's not unethical. That's the vote. That's the chosen direction of the city. That's what they think is best overall. That's not unethical. That 25% thinks it is. That's not watering it down. That's not apples to oranges. That's apples to apples. I think I walk my walk through life. I think one of the statements was not truly representative. Nobody, that would be you. For somebody to act like, think like, work like that.
They want the hive mind. They want that
That's it.
hive mindset that everyone thinks alike.
I'm me. I got a great walk through life. I got a giving, charitable, caring walk through life, and that's exactly what I apply. So again, not unethical to disagree with somebody in any way, shape, or form. Just thought I'd point that out. Of course, for those listening, I'm preaching to the choir.
And if anybody's watched what you've done over the last year as mayor, and I don't have a dog in this fight. What you say on the air or your attitude politically has not in any way influenced how you actually perform as mayor.
Yeah, be more impressed that they're two separate things and I handle it.
I do what you do because I actually, you talk to me, you know where I stand on just about anything.
Well, you got to keep up with me to understand how I'm moving and acting.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't need to explain anything. I'm keeping my 30,000-foot view.
You be you.
My big picture view, and I will not get caught up in the muck and mire. That's why you've heard nothing from me till I just wanted to give you a sip.
Yeah, I don't know what
That may be interesting.
I don't know what the muck and mire is here. I don't know what he means by that, but I think a couple of things I just want to point out. This isn't about a hive mind. This isn't about a matter of opinion. You said what you said. It impacted the community. That's not a difference of opinion. I think the other thing that this clip, like so many, demonstrate is one of the points we make in our ethics complaint is that the mayor uses his conservative talk show to speak about and for the city of Valdosta. He's doing it right now as he discusses the ethics complaint against him. So again, and not only that, he thinks he doesn't have to explain anything. So that's a little bit confusing. So that's where we're at with the feedback we've gotten from the mayor after his comments. And so what do we know at this point? What we know is that the mayor makes unsubstantiated accusations that voting canvassers in Valdosta, quote, didn't canvass and essentially were paid people to vote and cash their canvassing checks at, quote, the liquor store. The mayor, without any evidence whatsoever, assumes that people are voting that shouldn't be, and jokes about voter suppression and poll test, again, as the mayor of a predominantly Black city, many of which we have elders in this community that remember some of that voter suppression and unfair treatment. The mayor is then made aware that a significant number of Black leaders, again, we've got at least 36, 37 ministers, if we count the president of the NAACP, Black organizations, Black community members, Black council members, and Black city employees find his comments insulting and troubling. So we know that. And instead of apologizing and being curious about what he might have done wrong, the mayor instead begins painting himself as the victim relative to local press coverage in the Valdosta Daily Times and his use of just simple speech. He then feels the need to give everybody involved in this matter publicly on his radio station show a civics lesson, because evidently people aren't intelligent enough to know that this is just, quote unquote, a matter of opinion and that there's no actual ethics violation in the end. So with that said, I want to return to kind of the issue of unconscious white supremacy. And what I want to make the case for is that the mayor is in fact manifesting it here in a variety of ways. When he talks about the town needed him as a white man, as if there aren't people of color that are qualified that could do an equally good job, I think he's manifesting kind of white supremacy in that. It's also pretty clear that in that assumption, he thinks he knows better than all the other folks that were running for office. And he felt this way for 2 decades, according to what he even said. He and his co-host assume something's gone wrong and an injustice occurred. That's why they make all these unsubstantiated comments about voter suppression, or people voting that aren't supposed to be voting, and the need for voter suppression and the need for poll tests and so forth. And I think this is an example of, white conservative folks are losing their mind because they realize Black folks and brown folks have the potential for gaining political power in our country. We just elected the first Black senator in the history of our state this last election. So of course something must have gone wrong if we lost the election. Of course there must be fraud. And not only that, it's really powerful that you can say all those things on the airwaves without any evidence whatsoever, that you feel comfortable saying that about your own constituents without any evidence. As far as assuming white people are the norm, I think this is built in, but I don't think, we have clear evidence in what he says to this, but I do think it's kind of built into his earlier assumptions in some ways, but I left it unchecked. It's very clear that the mayor is either unaware of the history of voter suppression and the use of poll tests to exclude Black folks. He's from Cocoa Beach, Florida, so it's not like he's not from the South. They had segregation down there. They suppressed the Black vote in Cocoa Beach as well. But it's very clear that the history and the experience of non-white people isn't really worth knowing for him. He doesn't know about it and doesn't kind of go seek it out after everybody lets him know that what he said was a problem, or he just simply doesn't care. Even again, though those histories are linked to his and mine alike. So he's not even curious about kind of his impact on Black folks. And I often wonder when those of us who are white do things or say things that we know impact Black folks and brown folks or anybody different from us. It's kind of a commentary if we don't bother to go find out what we did. In some ways, it's a commentary about how worthwhile those people are and whether they matter or not. So he doesn't get into the typical practice of defining what racism is, because we don't really bring up racism in our complaint, so that's not in here. But I would say he and his co-host, but more so the mayor, is experiencing this challenge to his authority and his power from non-white folks as well as from white folks as cancel culture. He is said that. He said he's being punished or attacked for his simple speech. So again, his authority, he wants to say and do whatever he wants to say and do on his radio station as the mayor of Valdosta, right? And then when he insults, you know, a large portion of the population he's supposed to represent, he then shifts to kind of victimhood. The press is not treating him right. He's being punished for simple speech. Y'all don't even know this is just a difference of opinion. And he said on his show that he's also the victim of cancel culture, right? Again, instead of seeing the lives of Black constituents and Black Valdostas and Black council members as worthwhile and worth actually talking with about what he might have done wrong. So let me see, I think that's everything. So anyway, that was a lot. Thank you for hanging in. Let me be very clear. I'm not calling the mayor of Valdosta racist. I don't know the man. He seems pretty nice. He's probably a good husband. He's probably a good dad. I don't know. He won't talk with me, so I can't find out much. What I am suggesting is that he, like a lot of white people in my life and myself included, may be manifesting kind of this internalized unconscious white superiority. And I would argue that that in some ways is much more dangerous than conscious racism, because we know conscious racists say, or conscious white supremacists say who they are. People with kind of unconscious white supremacy generally run things like cities, like institutions of higher learning. They teach classes, they have institutional power. So I would argue that he is manifesting kind of unconscious white supremacy in terms of not only the comments he made, but his response to the complaints against him, his lack of curiosity about what he did wrong and how he hurt people. And not only that, that he's now the victim in the matter. He's being punished for free speech or simple speech. He's being canceled, and he doesn't want to get in the muck and mire of any of that. So if you think I'm wrong, please let me know. You can just send an email to info@goingsouth.org. If you want to come on and talk about white supremacy with me, I'll be glad to. I'm not an expert on it. I manifest these things myself. And I thought it would just be useful today to talk about them, especially in light of past podcasts where we bring the topic up and really don't dive deep into it. So thank you for listening to this. I hope it was informative. Please let me know what you think, and have a good day.